In this unit, we are discussing Chapter 13 in Tracy's textbook, Qualitative Research Methods. The topic is drafting, polishing, and publishing. This is the second unit on writing your paper. The goal of this unit is to help you as writers move from a first draft to a polished manuscript. Tracy discusses writing as a form of inquiry, how to embed qualitative data into an essay, and the grammatical issues that are related to writing, as well as formatting choices. For some readers, the discussion on publication that we talk about in the second half of the chapter might be beyond the scope of your interest. So let's now look at the overview for this unit. We're going to be looking at writing as a method of inquiry, writing and formatting, considering your audience, submitting, revising, and resubmitting your manuscript, and overcoming common challenges. By the time authors, as well as you, sit down to write your final report, you should have lots of raw materials in hand. These materials help relieve intimidation and serve as building blocks. So researchers sometimes think that they just need to write up their findings at this point. Well, however, the phrase writing up is considered problematic because it suggests you must have all your ideas and findings in your head before you start writing. This myth encourages procrastination and excuses such as writer's block. So rather than writing up, qualitative researchers and writers should find meaning by writing it into being. The real magic of writing is actually in the process of creation. Now, Tracy gives an example from Richardson, who has written several books on writing as a form of inquiry. She suggests several techniques, such as writing about the same scene from different points of view, taking an event and representing it as a narrative, a poem or a news story, or even addressing the writing to various audiences. Lamott is another example that thinks about writing as a gift to the reader. She recommends viewing the writing project as a letter. She suggests starting small and trying to write enough to fill a small picture frame. These are all suggestions that you as the writer can use. It's important to remember this. Writing techniques vary, but the key point is that qualitative meaning occurs when you are writing. Whether you're tapping your fingers across the keyboard, scrawling on a notepad, or writing at your computer. And first and foremost, create an outline that can help provide a guide and a map. Whenever I write any paper, even a report, I do an outline, and it's just a basic 1, 2, 3 of what I'm going to talk about. And then I can go back and add to that or just take from that. A successful qualitative essay constructs evidence in a persuasive, moving, and efficient manner. You want to choose your research methods, your research materials. A key question in identifying what are good data. This process begins during your data analysis. However, we continue to learn which data are valuable when we write the research report. Only use data that directly connects to the study's goals, research questions, and purposes within your final essay. Remember, you're going to collect a lot of information through your interviews or your focus groups or your field research, and you don't need all of it to answer your research questions. Most published articles really only include about 1,000 to 3,000 words of excerpted data, which is about 3 to 6 pages. You want your report to be rich, luminous, and contain thick representations. Try not to lose the vividness of a scene in your final report. And researchers should use rich data that is bountiful and emerge from a variety of sources. You should use luminous data that is poignant, revealing, and characterized by a paradox or enigma. Rich and luminous data not only shows how a phenomenon unfolds, but it will explain why they unfold. And making the familiar strange and the strange familiar can help engage the reader. An important guideline to representing your data is to show, don't just tell. The essay should be heavy with data examples. Every claim that you make should be supported by examples from the data. Readers are more likely to be persuaded if they see the data first and then hear the claim second. So show then tell is actually a more accurate description. When researchers show first, it discourages counterarguments. If researchers do list a claim first, an example should follow soon after. Grammar and sentence structure also impact the persuasive ability of the writer. Examples are provided of books that provide good writing advice. One technique is to replace unnecessary adverbs with descriptive verbs. An example would be Brad turtled versus Brad walked slowly. Verb tense also impacts how your story comes across. And I note this in the syllabus, that your literature review, because it's past literature, it's previous literature, should always be in past tense. And past tense is usually used to introduce your interview excerpts because the study has already been conducted. This is another thing I note within your introduction. You do not use future tense. You do not say, this study will show this. The study is already complete. So you want to say, this study shows this. Also, in your abstract, I note this too, the abstract should be in past tense because the abstract is written after it's done. You might begin the abstract, which is what we're going to go over. You write that first as part of, or we talked about this last unit, about you write the abstract to submit to the IRB or as part of a proposal. And in that point, it will be in future tense because it hasn't been done yet. But the abstract should always include what has been done and what has been found. So fieldwork excerpts may use both present and past tense. I said that. So check out exercise 3.1, which is the practices writing in different verb tenses. ePrime also serves as another grammatical tool. It asks writers to avoid using any form of to be, which includes is, was, were, or are. I also note this in the syllabus, that you are not permitted to use forms of to be within your writing. I will take off for that as part of your grammar grade. ePrime allows the writer to provide more specificity and detail. Despite its advantages, many people use to be so frequently that writing in ePrime feels almost impossible. But nonetheless, try it. Also, Grammarly.com is another resource that you can use that can check your grammar and structure. Let's talk now about formatting qualitative work. There are a number of style guides out there, and it all depends on your major and the school in which your studies. But the one that we use within the criminal justice program and usually within criminal justice work is the APA. And these style guides, they provide some guidance about how to format your qualitative essay. Tracy extends Kyle's 8 tips for including interview data in qualitative essays. Quotes should be related to the text. Quotes should be contextualized. Quotes should be interpreted. There should be a balance between quotes and text. Quotes should be short. Use only the best quote. Interview quotes should be rendered in written style. And there should be a simple signature system for editing of the quotes. There are different ways to reference data as well. Now, some of the guidelines where authors will list the data text name, page number, and line number. However, most reports don't provide this level of detail. With APA, you're required to list the author's last name, the date of the publication, and only a page number or paragraph number if it's a direct quote. Now, this is important information, and it really applies to any research paper, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, or even an essay that you have included with empirical research, which is mostly required in many of the assignments within the criminal justice program. So quotes longer than 40 words should be indented and in block format. This is listed in the APA manual. Refer to the APA manual beginning on 270, going through, I think, all the way to 277, and it gives you information on the length of quotes and how to do the block quoting. So it's not uncommon to rewrite field note excerpts for the final essay. They usually are. They are already constructed representations of the scene. Incorporating the field note data into prose may be more reader-friendly than long block quotations. I suggest seeing the examples from Tracy and Scott that's in Chapter 13. I also want to mention on this slide that within your APA manual, it talks about the use of ellipses and the use of brackets. And I think it's important that you review that while you're writing your final paper. One of the examples here of the use of brackets, if you change anything out of the direct quote, then is different than what was actually quoted in your resource. Let's look at this example here. So if you have an original quote where it says, she went to the store. Well, if you're going to put it in your paper, you would say, according to Black, she went to the store. But you see, I have changed the S in she to a lowercase. So anytime you do that, you put a bracket around it. Also, too, the purpose of the ellipsis, which I don't have an example here, if you were to add a word within a quote, that to maybe make it grammatically correct within your sentence structure, you would also add a bracket. Let's say too that you have a direct quote, but it's not a continual quote. Maybe you're using half of one sentence and half of another one. You would use the ellipsis in between those quotes while you can still have that entire quote within your quotation marks. And again, I suggest looking at the APA manual with those pages that I just referenced. Let's talk now about the visual representations within your final paper. Visual representations are valuable for presenting complex and nonlinear ideas. Visual data such as maps, photos, or models can be the primary focus of an essay or supplement written text. Some visuals such as flowcharts, tables, figures, matrices are discussed in Chapter 10. Researchers might consider constructing models, pie charts, or other visuals with data analysis software. Also, especially when you use quantitative research in a quantitative study, you would have tables and figures that would show your numerical analysis. So Tracy encourages researchers to think creatively about visual representation. For example, Timothy Huffman, he provides a creative visual representation in the researcher's notepad 13.1. Researchers should not shy away from visual representations. Some journals and disciplines, actually expect an article to contain some sort of visual representation. So let's talk about setting yourself up for success by considering the audience with which you're writing for. Consider who will be reading your research. Researchers need to consider how to enter a conversation. Know what others are already saying about a topic or issue. Incorporate information into your own formulations. Demonstrate that you have listened to what they said. Contribute and add something valuable of your own to the conversation. You should consider which conversation is most interesting within your research and then learn what's being said in the conversation. Both of these goals can be accomplished by reading. The tactics for considering audience and publication venue vary. Some students start a project without a particular audience in mind. In this case, consider what type of work you personally enjoy reading and where it's published. It can also be helpful to find article models and examine their format. So check out box 13.2. It's an activity on article format. models. Another method is to consider the format that's in journals that are commonly read or preferred in your discipline. In other words, look over the articles that you're using for your literature review and see their format. A journal's impact factor refers to the average number of citations to articles that are published in that particular journal. It is seen as a marker of prestige. So, however, an impact factor is only one way to determine the worth of an article. Some journals more regularly publish qualitative research. There's actually journals that just publish qualitative research in criminal justice. So look over the Tips and Tools 13.1, and there's a list of these types of journals. Journal article writing is really just one option for your research. Studies can be turned into book chapters, books, or even conference papers. So let's look at submitting, revising, and resubmitting for journal publication. And as I said at the beginning, some students are really not interested in this part. But this is something that, especially in criminal justice, if you plan on to go on with your PhD, that you definitely want to look in to some kind of publication or some kind of presentation at a conference. There are 5 commandments that Tracy lists, and the first is thou shalt know the submission guidelines. So pay close attention and follow the details of an article submission of where you're submitting it. Like, for instance, when I submit an article to a journal for publication, I have to read over their submission guidelines. And many journals, they're very different. Second, thou shalt face rejection. All researchers have pieces rejected at some point. I have. Good writers have a thick skin. Rejection and critique are part of the process, so try not to take it personally. And I haven't. I've submitted one article that asked for revisions, and that had asked for additional revisions. And I've had one that I sent in and never heard back. I had one that was actually rejected, and it was due to the length. So there's all kinds of reasons that they can be rejected. The third is thou shalt revise and resubmit. A revise and resubmission are good things, like I just said. So take a day or two to complain about the revisions, which is what I did. Then honestly try to address the reviewer's concerns, and then create a document that explains why you did or did not choose to make the specific changes along the way. When you are asked to make a revision to a paper, you don't have to necessarily do it. If you can explain why you feel that you shouldn't, it might be accepted. The fourth is, with persistence, thou shalt eventually succeed. The only way you will succeed is if you are persistent. Tracy discusses and also provides a timeline of the 5-year process it took to get the centerpiece article from her dissertation published. And that's why, if you ever notice when you're looking at some of the publications and you see some that are 2008 and you think that's the most recent, it's because it may have taken 10 years to actually have gotten that study published. Look at about her dissertation. It's in table 13.1. So finally, the last is thou shalt not rest on the laurels of success. Take the time to celebrate a publication. Have multiple projects at multiple stages going on at the same time. And that's what most academics do. Writing well means writing a lot, as I said. It's a lot of editing. It's a lot of rewriting. So how do you write a lot? Give yourself permission to write a mess. Write first and edit later. And that's what I do. You don't have to try to put down writing that is grammatically and sentence correct as well as citation correct. You want to just put your words on paper. What I do suggest to students is, when you are using any resource from one of your sources, to always put that source where you have written that in your paper. The last thing you want to do is have to go back and find that in an article, or find what article had it, or even the page number. Create a schedule and stick to it. Write every day, preferably at the same time every day. Make writing a habitual priority, not a ponderous decision. Write in small chunks of time, and don't reward binge writing with no writing. In other words, well, I spent all day yesterday writing, so I'm just going to take off a week. It is very important, and this is what I do, is I schedule a time every week that I actually do some writing. Find a friend or two or three or five. If this is something that you feel that you like or you feel comfortable with, is writing in the presence of other people, pick a place to meet. Most college libraries have study rooms that you can reserve within the library. I did that when I worked on my thesis at ETSU, where I had a room reserved for the entire semester. So create a writing haven wherever you feel comfortable. When I was working on my master's program, I actually wrote in the bedroom, and that's where I just felt most comfortable. Now I write in my office. Don't buy into the idea of writer's block. Set goals. You don't have to do it all in one sitting or one day or 1 week. Make a schedule, as we just said above, and try to stick to that. Monitor and tie consequences to your progress. For instance, if I can get through especially when I'm doing the editing process, well, I'm going to edit 10 pages today, and then I'm going to take myself out for a long walk. So let's talk now about addressing some common challenges within the qualitative writing. Looking at front matter. Identify the audience and write an informational and invitational abstract. This has to do with your introduction. So your introduction is where you provide a rationale that shows how and why your study is strong. Explain any unfamiliar writing formats or representations. You want to include the goals and the purposes of the paper, and they should be clear. What I do is when I write my introduction, I might put in there the focus of my study and the goals and purpose. And then after I have written my lit review, I will come back with some background on the topic within the introduction. And you also, too, after you've completely written the paper, you're going to come back and add things to your introduction. The literature review and conceptual framework. Only include material that moves the reader forward. Don't include long lists of citations. Make sure to define key terms and link all concepts to the purpose of the paper. Sometimes the best theoretical lens is the one you are already familiar with. Research questions should be previewed and anticipated by the literature. This is your prior literature. The reader should be able to differentiate past research from this study's contributions. Now let's talk about the methods section. In your paper for this class, you will have a methods section and your methodology section, your methods research section, where you're going to talk about how you're going to perform your study. Because you're not performing it, you'll have the information will be here. This is what I will do. This is what I hope to accomplish. This is how I will do it. So you want to check out the models of other model sections. Look at other articles that you've used. See how they've done it. Overview your methodology, qualitative approach, and your breadth of data before really getting into the specifics. Usually includes a background, data collection procedures, and your participants. Consider including sample interview questions and code books as your appendices. The findings and interpretation. Be careful of overclaiming. Clean up and improve the writing style of your field note excerpts. Use your participants' names when possible. Let the reader know the source of your data. Don't over-rely on any one type of data. Try to show, as we talked about before, and don't tell. And combine vividness with simplicity. Again, this findings and interpretation is a section that you won't have within your qualitative research paper for this class. The conclusion. This is important. Don't skimp on this section. Don't write just one paragraph to try to conclude and quit quickly. You want to go over the most the poignant points within your research, within your study. You want to include some of the prior research again, why it's important, and what you found to be most important. In this this conclusion, you would also have concluding any of your findings, but you're not going to have that within this paper. So you want to be specific in limitations, implications, and directions for future research. Every, as I talked about, I think in last unit, every paper, every project has some kind of limitations, and you need to be sure and list those. You want to end the piece with something that will inspire the audience to read more of your work. And again, look at the articles that you've chosen for your lit review. See what they've done. And remember that the overuse of endnotes is distracting and effortful. Limit them to 2 to 4. In fact, with APA, you want to not use endnotes. You'd want to use your citations. Consider looking at ePrime. Avoid unclear pronoun reference. Pay attention to the verb tense and the use, as I talked about, and avoid the passive tense and unclear reference. I mentioned this within the syllabus and within the research paper. Mix up your words. Abbreviations and acronyms can be tedious for the reader, so know the appropriate use of colons, semicolons, and types of dashes. Be sure and check APA for these requirements. And remember, writing is an individual art, so use what is most helpful to you from your readings in this unit. Simply following the rules does not guarantee high quality work or writing. And writing more is imperative to writing better. Remember, you need to reread and edit before you have your final copy. One of the ways that I suggest is reading out loud. When you read out loud, you will catch a lot of errors within your sentence structure and grammar that you wouldn't catch by reading it over and over again. So now let's look at our summary for this unit. In this unit, we explained how writing is a method of inquiry. We walked through the ways to think about the publication process and the tips for writing prolifically. If nothing else, banish the perfectionist self that keeps you from writing. You can and likely are doing it. And remember, writing more is better. And that's it for this unit. If you have any more questions or any questions, please post them in the office hours and I will answer them promptly.